We became missionaries 13 years ago after we were in this church. We visited a lot of churches in Manitoba then. This is a picture of Gary's family and my family growing up. And Gary grew up as a pastor's kid in the Reformed Church. And I grew up as a dairy farmer's daughter. And we met at university, and a year later we got married, and the pastor told us that he knew someday we were going to be in the foreign mission field. And we proceeded to have kids and farm. And had no intention of ever going to the mission field. And then about 30 years ago, Gary went on a mission trip to China. And all by himself. And while he was there, he felt called to mission. And he sat down and said, God, okay, if you really want me to go, I'm going to go. And then he phoned me and told me, and I always tell people this is a cautionary tale, do not send your spouse on a mission trip alone. But we ended up in Ukraine because I started learning to teach English as a second language at Providence University College and had to go on a foreign field to have experience. We went to Ukraine and Gary discovered there were cows there, and so his mission was going to be having a small demonstration farm to try to reach people for God. So we left 6 of our kids and 2 granddaughters behind. Our 2 youngest came with us for the first 2 years, and they did homeschooling there. This is Nikolai Poli. It's right kind of smack dab in the center of Ukraine. You see the maps now, Zaporozhye is where the Russian line is kind of approaching up on, and we are very close to there actually. It's about 70 kilometers away. But the first year we did some renovating of the house we were going to live in, and homeschooling, and got to know the country a little bit, learned a few words of Russian because we were in eastern Ukraine. Everyone spoke Russian at the time. Now people speak Ukrainian. The next year we built a barn. We hired a group of guys to come put up this tent barn. We had a mission team come from Steinbach, Manitoba that helped build the second floor of the barn where the Haymau is. That's them there. And basically spent more time getting to know people, and then we got cows. We bought cows from another village. So these cows got to walk more than 30 kilometers that day home. And the boys got to walk with them, and the ladies who came with them were the ladies who were milking them there, and they moved in and started milking the cows at our farm. And so they were milked by hand, they went into buckets. We bought a lovely tractor, Ukrainian tractors, and started farming. And a couple years later, a year later, we got milking machines and an actual tank to get the milk pulled in and not have it in buckets sitting and waiting. We've done a lot of English teaching in the city, more to do with the big English summer institute like I did the first year that we were there. And then we met a man named John Weems. And John had a dream of starting a trade school for what they call aged-out orphans. These are kids that grew up in the orphanage system, and once they graduate from a trade school, they kind of just put them out into society, and they do not do very well. They end up on the street. A lot of the boys end up in crime, get arrested, so this was a way to help these kids out. So the first class was about 7 people. Unfortunately, we spent a lot of money that first year. And the next year we kind of had a pause, and unfortunately Mr. Weems passed away from cancer, and his family asked us to continue the program. So we started, we renovated a barn, an old, it's like where the cows were milked in the old days in Ukraine. And, but we restarted with a smaller class, less top-heavy stuff, and so we were able to continue the program, and we generally have had between 12 and 20 students at a time. Right now there's about, we were on the news in Ukraine, and so here is the subtitles in English. Let's see the lady talking. We must have had 15 at that time. So basically, Gary taught the kids how to farm, and I taught English. Later, I taught cooking because that turned out to be a skill that the kids really needed to learn to live on their own. And this is when we had the cows in the little barn. Before we moved to that barn, they were renovating the pictures before. See, there's the milk tank. We were actually only used 3 times in Ukraine. We were considered very interesting foreigners who came to Ukraine to help people. So, that you would leave your family and go to Ukraine to help these orphan kids are considered. So all of our kids are like, basically, all were over 18 when they started with us. Some of them are like in their mid-20s now. One of them, I think, even turned 30, one of the married ones. So we tend to not be able to get rid of some of them. The idea was we were going to train them and then they'd be able to live on their own. But we have a number of students who are disabled in some way. And so we end up with kids that really can't live on their own, so they end up staying in the program. Some of them have been around for 6 years now, instead of 2 years and then they go somewhere. Some of them do leave and have been successful. Some of them moved on to other Christian organizations and have really changed their lives. But this was a guy that we had them living with Ukrainian Christian families to try to teach them home family skills. And that is the classroom at the time. And this young man said he really wanted to be a farmer and got interviewed on TV. And then 2 weeks later, his girlfriend said she would take him back, and he left and we never saw him again. But he was very excited for 2 weeks about farming. But that happens a lot. We always say that sometimes we help them a little and sometimes we help them a lot. And sometimes they find God and sometimes they don't, but they all feel that some kind of influence in having come to our program. But that's Gary saying Poka, which is Bible in Russian, which impressed all of the people. So basically, where did I leave off? It hasn't clicked. So basically, that is, in a nutshell, what our program is like. We try to teach them skills. We feed them. Try to teach them how to do their own cooking, their own cleaning, their own everything. And a little bit about dairy farming and crops. They really enjoy the crop part. They like to go out and check out things and see how things are growing in dairy. Luckily, we have people there now who are taking care of the program. This is the Mennonite, well, it's kind of a Mennonite Brethren church in the village. It's sponsored by them. It's the only evangelical church in the village. About, generally a dozen people go there, but now that the war started, I think there's like 30. This is VBS. We sponsor a VBS every year in the village, and pretty much all the kids in the village will show up at it. This is some work teams. We get a lot of work teams from Canada. Gary, because he went on a mission trip and felt called to mission, feels that the more people he can get to come, the more likely he is to find somebody who will want to become a missionary. And so we've had a lot of large groups come, some from Manitoba, some from British Columbia, we've had a few from Alberta. One year they put on a VBS while they were there for the entire village. They did it in the village school, and the kids were really impressed with it. Our students get to work with people when they're coming on these work teams. They really enjoy that. They all practice their little bit of English that they know. We've remodeled houses for places for students to live. We've remodeled classrooms. This was apartments. We did a classroom in apartments in this big building that you can see where they were taking parts of it out there. But this is the inside of the building after it's done. It's used as a classroom and a large meeting place. That's Thanksgiving dinner there at the top where all that's sitting eating. We have, basically our students have kind of grown up with us. So we now have students that have married. And there are, when we left last year, there were 3 babies. The oldest is 4 years old now. And there are 2 more on the way right now, actually, so hopefully all goes well. Here are some students working, milking the cows. The main job now is the students do milk the cows with, one of the ladies who originally came with the cows that day actually is still working for us and is in charge of that. We had a couple come from Saskatchewan a couple years ago, but they left just as COVID pandemic started. They came back, and we were all ready to build a house for the group that was coming from BC when, like the week the pandemic closed everything down. So the students in Gary and the staff built this house all by themselves, without any help from Canada. So, and one of the families moved in. So COVID kind of made it difficult to do what we normally do. People wore masks a lot. In English groups, if we had them online, we did a lot of outdoor stuff. Like, instead of teaching 800 people, we were there. Unfortunately, last year in March, Gary and I got COVID, and we spent 2 weeks in the hospital in Ukraine in April, and we were really sick. But luckily, we survived. God was watching out for us, even though the hospital system there is not great. The bed was so uncomfortable, but it kind of made us reassess what we were doing, because Gary was turning 65 last December. And if we were retiring, and we don't have anybody to take over the program from Canada, then who's going to take over the program? So we were lucky. We had this new couple come, and they were going to do the book work and take over some of the day-to-day activities with the students, like scheduling and paying them and all the kind of stuff that Gary always did, discipline. And Max and Yana are still here. Max was baptized probably 10 years ago now. And he came to work for us that very first year. And his dream is that his 4 brothers also become Christians. But he is in charge of all of the crops and all the machinery and all of the various people who work for us besides the students. And last year, just before we came back, we took them on a vacation to Egypt, and they just loved it. Also, Yana, who is the lady who milked the cows that very first day there, she is in charge of all the student scheduling and making sure the cows are treated properly and everything like that. So we kind of felt like we had a basic core of people who could take care of the program. And so we thought, for the next few years, maybe we'll do a bit of a transition. And we'll be like 6 months in Canada, 6 months in Ukraine, like 3 months at a time maybe. So we're going to leave for 3 months and kind of leave them all, I don't think the slide is going to change, leave them all in charge of what was happening. And it would give them a chance to be the boss, because the students all say, oh, there's nothing happening, or they don't like what's happening, and they will go to Gary and say, Gary, I don't like what Oleg is doing, or I don't like what Max is doing. You have to fix it. And because Gary is fairly proficient in Russian, and so the students all know they can talk to him. I am terrible at Russian. I know some words, but that's the extent of my Russian activities. But so we said, well, we'll go for 3 months and we'll see what happens, because they'll be in charge. I think we have to change the slide manually, because I don't think that one's going to change. But we did. And so we were back home with our family. That is our family now. We now have 12 grandkids. And almost everyone except for the 2 youngest boys that came to Ukraine with us are married. So it's a big, large group. And so it was exciting to be able to spend more time at home. And then it got to be February, and we were supposed to fly back at the beginning of February. This is the students the day before the war happened on February 24th. Because we had delayed leaving because there was a warning, and the mission is like, well, you know, you really shouldn't go now because there could be a war. And we said, well, there's not going to be a war. So we had rescheduled for the end of February, and of course the war happened on February 24th. So this is how we now see the barn and do Zoom calls with the staff. And Gary has a thing on his phone where he can like click up the people milking cows outside and all kinds of stuff, live feed. And so things are going really well there at the farm right now. The front line is still 70 kilometers away, and everyone feels safe. They're working, they're able to sell milk. They planted the crops. They've got the irrigation out through the corn. I have more slides about farming, because that's the part Gary usually talks about. And, oh, I don't know where that came from. Oops. But, probably lost it. But, basically,
sorry.
Oh, we may have just lost them. That's all right.
I'll get back.
We'll see if we can find the slides about we'll see if we can find the slides about the farming. Basically, our farming consists of, we grow sunflowers, we grow wheat. Both of those crops are pretty good dryland crops. In the area we're at between Zaporozhye and Dnepropetrovsk, or Dnepro now, there is not a lot of rain, especially in the summer. So those things grow really well on years when there's lots of rain. Sunflowers tend to grow well no matter what. So there's some of the sunflowers, and that's the barn with its Ukrainian flag things. We painted them in 2014 when the first war started to support Ukraine. But corn and, oh, this is the farm. Here you go. This is the farm just before the war started in the winter. And those are the big barns, the hay shed, the heifer barns on the side. And so that is our farm compound. That is the dump at the very end, which they're hoping to close. But basically your crops that need a lot of water, like corn and hay, oh, here we go, have some trouble. And so a few years ago, we were able to put in some irrigation. So our corn has gone from being small to being really nice corn to make corn silage to feed the cows and sell some extra crops. Grain is usually sold, wheat is usually sold, there's the cows in the barn. And sunflowers are always sold. Sunflowers are sold at Preston Doyle. This is typical typical farming in Ukraine. Everybody has a few goats, a few cows, maybe one or two cows, a bunch of chickens. They tend to run on the street, the chickens. It's kind of like the cows actually, they group together and they all go out to pasture and people chase them for the day and then they come back. Is the way typical Ukrainian farming happens. Gary has been, this is a typical dairy farm. Gary has been breeding cows artificially with Canadian semen for like the last 12 years for people in all different villages. They phone him, it's all in Russian or Ukrainian, and they talk, and he goes there and he breeds their cows for them. And they love the cows because they're big. The calves are bigger than typical Ukrainian cows because they're Holstein crosses. And so Gary breeds cows all over the place, out in the fields. It's an interesting way to meet people, and then people will ask him why this Canadian is in Ukraine, and then he's talking a little bit about how he felt called by God to come and go to Ukraine and help people. So that was his original plan before we met all the people with the aged-out orphans from the trade school. But so he's had two different ways to help people. Some typical Ukrainian tractor and baler. We bale lots and lots of hay and straw every year. The students are the labor for that. The boys tend to get all the stacking. And because we now have irrigation on the hay, we're able to grow more hay, alfalfa on less land. And so that's done with this water gun thing. For the corn acres, it's done with drip line irrigation, which they bury in the ground every spring. And they did it this year because they were able to buy water again. And so they're pretty excited. I don't know if they've watered the hay. They've already done first cut hay, and they were going to do second cut hay very soon. Maybe they've already started, actually. But there's some of the hay that they've grown. That hay vine actually came from Canada. Somebody sent us a container full of equipment one time. Here they are putting the drip line irrigation in. The students love these jobs like drip line irrigation and baling because they get paid extra for those jobs. And so then they've got extra money to spend on whatever they want to buy, which tends to be better telephones. But they're just like 20-year-olds everywhere. They need better telephones and different clothes. But this is how they put the fertilizer in the irrigation line. They just mix it up in a bathtub and pump it out with the bags of stuff. But basically, it's meant that we've been able to really turn a profit on the farm. The farm is able to support our entire program to pay the students, the staff, and actually purchase more equipment for the farm. Last year they bought a new tractor and built another storage shed, which is really good because they don't know if they'll be able to sell anything this year, because right now the price of grain, of wheat is really high all over the world, but in Ukraine it's practically nothing because they can't get it out of the country. And so they can't really sell it. So they're just about ready to start harvesting our wheat, and they'll probably just put it in the shed and hope the Russians don't get there, because the Russians have, in places where they have taken over, blown up equipment, stole equipment, destroyed the crops, and are trying to sell them in other places. So we're hoping that the line stays where it is and they do not get to where we are. There's the guys bailing. So that's usually a several-month job. And sunflowers. Sunflowers are the favorite Ukrainian crop because they'll grow even if it's really dry, although they're better if it rains. So basically, our guys are safe. They're able to sell milk and do everything. This is the Pray for Ukraine slide. That's Pray for Ukraine in Ukraine, by the way. Ukraine is Ukraini. But right now, the EFCC has a program to help the Benevolence Fund, if you designate your things for Ukraine. So basically, as Mark is going to say, pray for our students and staff. Right now, our guys are able to cope with what they have. That's Max. Max became a Christian after he came to work for us. And he is really good at dealing with people and getting things done and fixing equipment and all that stuff. So Gary has no worries that the farm isn't running just fine without us. And it seems like the students are doing all right with the new people that were in the other slides. So here are our students. Last summer we took them to the sea, to a place that's now not Ukraine at the moment. But that's the whole group. We took them there for 3 days, and I cooked for all of those people on 2 burners in a little apartment. It was very fun and exciting, and they really enjoyed their time out. And that is Leela. Leela is a special person because she, if she was not with us, would be stuck in an adult handicap orphanage, as they call them. And she was injured as a child and had a brain injury, so she tends to try to hurt herself if she's not directed well and stuff. And so we're really glad that we're able to do things. And she is going to a prayer meeting every night to pray for us while we're praying for them. And so it really, really touches your heart to see that they're ready to, there's a couple of other students that, I'm pretty sure that Sasha there in the blue sweatshirt has fetal alcohol syndrome because he cannot remember anything. He starts doing something and he forgets what he's supposed to be doing. But he's always enthusiastic and really happy to help. And so that's some of the students that we tend to have. Those two, she's going to have a baby almost any day now. And so hopefully the maternity hospital stays safe because she will be there in Zaporozhye, which is the line is getting closer to from what I'm hearing. So, but that is our official place. These are their little guys. The little girl just turned 2 a month or 2 ago. They had a birthday party complete with a Paul Croquet. And so Gary really misses that. He feels like they're our grandkids too, because we spend so much time with them. We actually have some refugee families staying in our village. This particular family with 6 kids actually is just going to stay. They came from Mariupol, which is, not Mariupol, Melitopol, next to Mariupol, which is one of the cities that the Russians took over, and so they just left with pretty much nothing. And they're actually living in one of our houses that we don't have any students in at the moment. They also had some people come from Mariupol that stayed for a few weeks, and then for a couple days, and then they move on to Western Ukraine. This is Kramatorsk. Kramatorsk is in the news now because it's in Eastern Ukraine. It's one of the places that's getting bombed, and they're trying to take over along with Slobodansk places. Gary was there just a year ago doing a BDS there because they wanted someone to do an English portion of the program. Kramatorsk is where this pastor Yura is from. He is in the middle of, on the left there. He brought a group of ladies when we had a building team out, and they helped build a fence. And they were all older ladies. It was amazing. And so he is actually going into Kramatorsk now. His family he sent away to, they're in Poland, I think. But he has been driving in every weekend with a team to hold evangelical meetings and hand out food aid to people. And so they've had almost 1,000 people coming to their things. And that is right in the middle of the war. It is really a dangerous place to be going, but he's still going there. So the FCCM does have the benevolence fund, and if you mark your donations for Ukraine, they actually are making sure that money goes to help Ukraine. A lot of it is going for food aid, like we saw there. We've actually, the church in Dnipro, we've actually sent money from the benevolence fund to them because they're doing a program. So far, Dnipro has been pretty safe, and so a lot of the refugees that are coming from the east are going there and staying there, and so they're feeding people and presenting the gospel on Fridays, and so they hand them, like, 1 week they give out sugar and tea or bread, or not bread, usually various different staples generally, and so to these people. And so it's been a really, and I think we also sent money to someone who needed to fix a van, where they were moving people from one of the areas, like, I think it was Kharkov, where the bombings were happening, and they were moving people around, and they were bringing food aid to people and stuff. And so we've been able to help with a couple projects like that. Right now, the EFCCM official policy is you can't go any place where Canada says you shouldn't go. Oh, there's some people in there. And so we're not allowed to go back until Canada says it's okay to travel there. So that is why Gary is right now in Poland. He was, a month ago, we got an email saying that they were interested in having someone to come and help out with the people in Poland because they have thousands and thousands of refugees. So the place he's at is actually really close to Germany, and you wouldn't think there would be that many refugees going that far into Poland. But they have about 150 families that they are feeding. They can come once a week and pick up food. And so Gary has been helping. He picks up bread, free bread every morning and drives it places and goes and buys food and is helping this pastor there with this program. So next month I'm supposed to join. So I'm hoping that it all goes well. I got to do some things this month that we were supposed to be doing before Gary suddenly said, I'm going to go to Poland. And he says that he almost thinks it's better we're sending money right into Ukraine to help people. Because not only are there people that are displaced that are moving around, there are also people who are, like, they're out of work. Their jobs have stopped because of the war. And so there's lots of people who need help. I think I covered everything except for, you never know what is ahead, but God has a plan and He may make you part of it. So we had no plan to ever go to Ukraine, but once we were there, God kept finding things for us to do. And we just hope that we'll be back in Ukraine, and it's really good to see that God had a plan to keep our program going without us, because it seems to be moving just nicely. Oleg is really great with the students. He is taken over at the little church there because the pastor is bedridden now, and he's doing the preaching and the singing, and there's, I think, 3 times as many people going to the church now as there was. And so it's really good to see how God moves people around, getting ready for something you don't know is going to happen.